How is everybody doing tonight? It took me about 10 minutes to realize it wasn't AC/DC up here. You all ready to witness a miracle? Well, buckle in, because it's going to happen. So, my name is Cameron. I struggle with drug addiction, alcohol, pornography, sin in general, and I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. Hey, Cameron. I'm a man of few words. Any questions? I say I'm a believer at the end for two reasons. One, it shows my sins for all to hear and exposes them. Two, I say Jesus' name at the end as to wipe my sin slate clean and to save the best for last, because He is the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega. Anytime I say those words, I think to myself, man, that's a lot of sin. But then I realize that my God is bigger than my sin. And as one man sinned in the garden to doom us all, one man, God incarnate in the flesh, saved us. Rather amazing, if you ask me. But that's God's love for us. My life ended the night of August 7th, 2023. I was born again. It was a very painful and complicated birth, but necessary. This story is to show you that God makes miracles happen and that His grace is unmatched. Still don't believe in miracles? Listen to this. I injected 200 micrograms of fentanyl and 500 milligrams of ketamine in the same syringe intramuscular. With my weight at the time, it should have killed me. By all rights of pharmacokinetics, I should be dead. But I'm here. I should be in prison right now. I was facing 8 to 12 years in prison, but I'm a free man. My wife should have divorced me long ago, but I'm still married and reconciled. My children stopped talking to me and once stated they didn't love me anymore, but I have their love as their earthly father, and they talk to me daily. They express how much they love me all the time now. I'm not worthy of my family, nor of God's love. I should have a criminal record that is a mile long, but my record was wiped clean just like my soul. Washed in Jesus' blood, I no longer am a slave to my sins. I no longer fear Satan, but fear God, for this is the beginning of wisdom. God cast Satan out in Jesus' name. With all these things I've stated, if you still don't believe in miracles, when that those who have eyes can see, look upon this miracle that stands before you. I should not be here, but by the grace of God, I am. To those who have ears, let them hear my story, because all glory is to God. This is where my journey began, and it was the beginning of the end. Yeah, I don't know how much worse it can get than that bowl cut. That's me, circa 1989. I was about 6 years old. I started off as a correctional officer for the state of Nevada. I was a CO for 4 years before I had enough of being in such proximity to evil men. You could say it rubbed off on me. God says if you hang around with garbage men, you will eventually smell like garbage. I began to drink in excess. It started every weekend and morphed into every day. My days were difficult and far from being dinner conversation worthy. I gained an unfathomable amount of weight. I went from 220 at my fighting weight to nearly 380 pounds. My drinking ensued, and when I had enough of the exposure to evil, I expressed that I didn't want to deal with that anymore. I didn't want to house and protect evil men. I wanted to be dashing into the fray, being the first person someone saw in their hour of need. It was my calling, so I decided to look into EMS. I went back to school. I took my education very seriously, as I didn't previously in school. And by school, on paper, prior to getting my GED, and by GED, I mean good enough diploma, I had a 4th grade education. I ended up valedictorian of both my basic and intermediate class, which I was told was unheard of by the school administrator. I was proud, and that pride carried me down a road that was long, wide, and broad. It was the start of a ditch that I was digging for myself, and by ditch, I mean grave. My first time getting pulses back on a patient, commonly known as ROSC, or return of spontaneous circulation, I felt I was high. And it was a high I yearned for every day. Of course, I wanted more. I was a mere intermediate. I was capable of starting some IVs, administering some medications that didn't have cardiogenic effects, and some advanced airway skills. I wanted to be the elite. I wanted to become a paramedic. The end-all, be-all when it came to scope of practice, the highest level of care, the one firefighters and cops look to for help. I wanted to harness the skills to reach into someone's life and make a difference. But whether it was directly or indirectly saving someone's life, being involved in that process meant more to me than all the wealth and gold and fame and prestige in the world. I wanted to help. So the company I worked for, is it not working now? I guess not. Next slide. There we go. The company I worked for sponsored me to go back to school. That's my daughter, by the way, circa 2016. Oh, yeah, sorry. There we go. I missed that one. That was when I was a corrections officer. Now you can go to the next one. So for 18 months, I spent every waking moment working towards my goal. There was a period of 14 months where I didn't have a day off. I'd work 12 hours, go to school the next day, then follow up with a 12-hour in-personal hospital clinical. Work, school, clinical, lather, rinse, repeat. Finally, I passed all my exams. I had my 30-shift internship, and I was ready to take National Registry. People don't realize that medic and nurses essentially have the same degree. One is pre-hospital, one is in-hospital. I was cut loose right before Christmas in 2015. To give you a sense of how intense life was as a medic, in 2014, Las Vegas had the fourth highest 911 call in the nation, next to Seattle, New York, and LA County. It was a very busy system, riddled with the sickest patients you can imagine from all walks of life and all ages. Death is non-discriminatory. It can take you at any moment. I was very aware of that fact. It was an objective fact as I witnessed the worst pain and horrifying deaths that evil had to offer. I felt I was powerless against it. I always prided myself in knowing I was preparing myself mentally for the next big event. Was I going to watch the MGM Grand implode? Was I going to watch an airplane hit the Stratosphere Tower? Where will I be in relation to that incident? How many people can my rig hold? How many tourniquets do I have? How many IV setups? How much fluid do I have? I was known as the poop magnet. They used a very different word, but there's no place for bad language in a Christ-centered recovery. Intubation was one of the last resorts a medic would take to secure the airway. We take a rather large tube. A tool used was a laryngoscope and perform what is called direct visual laryngoscopy. We place the tube in your vocal cords and breathe for you. It also blocks your vomit from entering your lungs, causing pulmonary aspiration. Most medics on a national average have 1 to 3 intubations in a year. My first year, I had 31. The second, 27, and the third, 25. I had more critical calls than most average medics in the country, and it showed. I was chosen to represent Las Vegas in a national clinical competition. In the region, my partner and I placed first out of 7 states. We went to nationals. Out of 7 regions, we placed third in the nation. That's me and my partner. It was the first time Las Vegas brought home any kind of trophy. It was bragging rights, and I did a lot of it. Then it hit. Anybody know what this is? Route 91, October 1st, 2017. A gunman named Stephen Paddock fired several thousand rounds of .223, .556, and .762 from the 30-second window at Mandalay Bay. One of my best friends, Stephen Schuck, that's me and him, and that's him on the Ellen DeGeneres show, was the engineer on that night. He was actually shot at and dodged several bullets as he fired through the door of the suite the gunman was in. Hundreds of people were injured. Hundreds were shot. 58 people perished. In reality, a lot more than 58 people died because FEMA cuts off the death toll at 48 hours post-incident. They don't count for the deaths that occur after the mark from bleeding out, during surgery, or other tertiary injuries or deaths. All told, there was probably close to 100 people that died. I was supposed to have been on duty that night. I worked 10 a to 10 p. I was out on bereavement leave. My father died just 2 days prior from prostate cancer. I went to bed that night with my phone off for the first time in years. I didn't want to be disturbed. I drank to excess, gave myself Benadryl IV and fentanyl. When I awoke, it was 6 a.m. and turned on my phone, and all I got was an influx of approximately 100 text messages from my company. Things like, all available medics and EMTs, please come to station. Huge mass casualty incident on the strip, 100 shot. Please come in if you're off shift. Pleading. The text thread continued, getting more and more desperate. Finally, around 4 a.m., the text became less and less, and eventually the text went out saying, staffing needs met. I turned to the news, and there was about 30 dead accounted for at the time. I watched as my sheriff and medical director of UMC briefed the media as to what happened. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. All I knew is I was at home and wasn't needed anymore. I missed it. I missed the largest mass shooting in our nation's history. I missed the opportunity to use my skills to help others on a large scale. To help my fellow man from the brink of death as I returned to work after bereavement, the mood had changed dramatically. People weren't the same. People actually asked me, where were you, man? I didn't even respond to them. I knew I had missed an event that shaped most of the medics and EMTs that I know today. It shaped them so much, it took on shapes like suicide and drug overdoses. Many of my friends have passed on after that event. I missed an event because my father died, and I grieved him. I hated him for it, as if my resentment needed to grow any deeper with him. And then shortly after that, I was fired for stealing IV Benadryl from the trucks. Now, if you know anything about Benadryl is approximately 50 milligrams you take when you have an allergic reaction. I was taking close to 200 milligrams a night. And I would start a little IV in my wrist, I'd start it in my arm, I'd start it in my legs. I even taught my wife how to start IVs. That's the level my addiction took me to. And I got fired for it. Started to think about suicide. I began to formulate a plan. In confidence, I told several colleagues of mine. They expressed little to no concern as to not validate it legitimate enough to warrant any further investigation or intervention. Remember, we're EMS. We're tough guys who can handle anything you throw at us. Bring it on. You're mentally inferior for feeling those things, and shame on you for being someone who can't handle it. You're a cancer. Don't speak to me. Not the truth in the least. We're human beings with real feelings and emotions. We cry, we hurt, and we grieve those we couldn't save. To pretend you don't feel is to try and ignore it. And to ignore it is to stir up wrath within you until it comes out in ways you couldn't possibly imagine. You do things you swore to yourself you'd never do, and then you do them. You jump from one foot to the next. You self-diagnose, you self-treat, usually with some type of self-destructive behavior, drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, overexertion, and no help needed. We're a proud bunch who work 12, 24, 48, and 72-hour shifts. Shortly after I was fired, I was hired by another company, and 4 months after that, I was promoted to operational supervisor. Talk about second chances, more like 50 in this case. I've always said, it's not what you see, it's what you can't unsee. Some things haunted me. I remember in early 2018, I responded to a horrific scene. It came across our computer as cardiac arrest. Patients were reported to be young children. As we headed there, I began to prepare myself for my treatment plan. Were there pulses? What's the etiology or cause of the arrest? Was there an intact airway? Where is the nearest pediatric center? I walked into a horror movie. The smell of stagnant blood, heavy laden in iron, riddled the scene. It penetrated my very being. My hair stood up on the back of my neck. I began to get that old feeling of nausea, as I did with other past traumatic scenes. I hated that feeling. A 12-year-old girl lay there dead, stabbed several times. She had been deceased for at least 12 hours. Dependent lividity and rigor were present while she lay in a pool of sticky, coagulated blood. She had a blanket over her and looked peaceful, as if she were just put down for a nap. A boy to my left, stabbed multiple times, moaning. I said, "He's alive. Time to clock in. Let's do it." I began to assess his airway. It was open and patent. He needed an IV for fluid resuscitation and a good trauma surgeon. We made it to the trauma center. Story goes, the children's mother was going to divorce the father. Father threatened to kill the kids if she divorced him. He found them, tried to kill them. One, he succeeded. He then found the mother, shot her. She survived. Then turned the gun on himself. He also survived. The boy also survived. Last I heard, he was a paraplegic. We don't hear much on this side of EMS. This story is no different from many of the scenes I've responded to over the years, so what is the significance? Little girl was a friend of my daughter's. This hit home for me. My daughter came home from school in tears. I didn't know how to tell her I was the one who responded to the call. From that point, my spiral continued. Anyone who knew me, and by knew me, I mean they were accustomed to the facade I portrayed to them. I've heard it said, "Cameron, you're so funny. You're always smiling and happy." People received a false version of me. On the inside, I was rotten to the core. I had nightmares every night. I escaped reality every chance I got. I wasn't who they thought they knew. I was something completely different and evil, nonetheless. I was far from any state of happiness. Being funny and spouting self-deprecating humor were just defense mechanisms. I hated myself and who I had become. Where was God in all this? Why couldn't He save me? He was here, right here, all along. His voice was just quieter than my demons that I allowed to consume my every thought. The drugs and alcohol began to tighten its grip on me. God wanted me back, but I wasn't ready. I was going to die in my sin, and it made me weep for forgiveness. I was struck, my chains wouldn't allow me to break free, and I was a prisoner to my own will. I thought to myself, how can I rectify not being there for my brothers and sisters? I know I'll kill myself in such a public way they'll have to take notice. My death will open a national dialogue, and they'll have no choice but to deal with the consequences of performing at the highest level of mental acuity and prove to those people you can't ignore it. You can't not crash at some point. You need to reach out for help. Even in the most mundane of calls or experiences, I was so used to being in control because you must be in this field. You need to be assertive, domineering, controlling, multitask-oriented, resourceful, and independent above all. The traits of an unsaved and proud individual. 2019, I got injured on the job. That's C4, C5, herniation. My neck became herniated after I stopped a patient from hitting the ground. My neck and shoulder went with her. I was out of work for 18 months. I was fired from my job because I wasn't cleared from light duty. That may not seem like a big deal, but when your job entails lifting heavy objects, there's no such thing as a light duty position. So they fired me. I spent 18 months fighting for a definitive answer to my pain. Meanwhile, I used Tramadol, 50 milligrams, 6 to 8 times a day. That's a lot. I used fentanyl, marijuana, and drinking more alcohol than I can afford. My states of sobriety were rare. I woke up intoxicated and went to bed the same way, if not worse, when I woke up. I don't recall much of that period in time. Weird. I had started working as an EMS educator at the College of Southern Nevada. I taught all 3 disciplines. I worked as a medic in a hospital with a full scope of practice. I swore to myself that I would never work on the ambulance or what we call on the box again, ever again. But it wasn't enough. I had played in the evil city for too long. that every place I turned to triggered a memory of my past. Oh, that corner I pulled a child from under a car. Or there's the building we worked a cardiac arrest on the 26th floor. Oh, look, there's the Mandalay Bay where I'm discounted as being a coward because I wasn't there thanks to the death of my father. I had to leave, and it needed to be far away. We chose Chattanooga. It was a population of 180,000 versus 2.6 million in Las Vegas. It was in the middle of the Bible Belt, which I loved, and nowhere near California. But alas, my problems followed me. Also weird. After a year of being back on the ambulance in Winchester, Tennessee, while on the job and clocked in as a paramedic, I attempted suicide. I drove my ambulance to an overpass, held a gun up to my head, and kept the cops at bay. I injected myself with the 200 milligrams of fentanyl and 500 milligrams of ketamine. By all rights of pharmacokinetics, that dose should have killed me, but here I am. I was an award-winning paramedic who valued life above all else, or so I thought. I remember when I first pulled over, the officers pulled up to my side, guns drawn, "Get out of the vehicle!" As the weapon was drawn to my head, I lowered my window and I said, "Listen, guys, I'm not here for you. These are jacketed hollow points. I don't want collateral damage. Please keep your distance. I'm not here for you. The weapon is pointed in a safe direction as to avoid that collateral damage. Go home safe to your family. You're my brothers." And I rolled up the window. The next 3 hours would prove that God had other plans for me. I thought I was hallucinating, but a spiritual realm was opened. I saw a rainbow, the same one that God bestowed upon Noah as a sign of peace. I heard a voice say, "I'm not done with you." It was a whisper and a concert speaker all at the same time. I awoke to flashing police lights and lasers on my chest from a dozen rifles pointed in my direction. It's very humbling being at the business end of the law. I spent 9 days in a behavioral health clinic. Do you think I learned my lesson? Most people would, but not I. Because I'm special. All thoughts of escape had consumed me. I needed to get out to get more drugs and alcohol. God had tried to save me from myself, but I pressed on in my pride. I okey-doked everything the doctors asked of me. No, I'm not suicidal. No, I'm not depressed. And I was released on an increased dose of medication. It was the wrong medication. If you know anything about bipolar disease, which I had, it was undiagnosed at the time. I was initially diagnosed with depression. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as SSRI, Prozac, Zoloft, and bipolar is a deadly mix. You couple that with alcohol, you couple that with marijuana, you couple that with fentanyl, you have a recipe for death. I spent the next month high. There wasn't a day without some fashion of escape from my reality. Not that it was different from any other day, just more of the substance. The night of August 7th, while high on bath salts, marijuana, alcohol, and pride, I beat my wife half to death. I don't remember much about that night. My moment of realization was when a taser probe hit me in the back and 6 police officers pummeled me to the ground. She ended up with a severe concussion and bruises from her head to feet. If you want an example of what unconditional love looks like, ask my wife. I was taken from my life by God Himself and dropped into the toilet I had made for myself. I spent the next 60 days in hell. Well deserved. I made thousands of foxhole prayers. God, please save me. I screamed. I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in 40 days. God was about to show me how powerful He was. At a certain point, I stopped praying for myself, and I prayed for God to heal my wife and my family. I prayed that God would find someone who could treat my wife the way she deserved. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine whom I met in jail. When I met him, he was a Satanist, and now he's a born-again Christian. Jason over here. Give him a hand. He's 309 days sober. Things would never be the same for me. My hopes of ever working in the medical field were over. My 20-year marriage closed. My future for the next 8 to 12 years finished. My relationship with my children ended. I had mourned my life. My life as I knew it was actually just beginning. Upon my release, I was sent to rehab in Memphis with a beautiful ankle bracelet GPS tracker, courtesy of Hamilton County General Sessions Court. I would spend 90 days learning the meaning of grace and forgiveness. The name of the rehab was Graceland. If you still don't believe in miracles, let's recap. I was facing 8 to 12 years in prison. The 8 felony charges were dismissed and hereby expunged from my record. It's as if they never happened. My wife, whom was bombarded with family and friends, pleading for her to divorce me, forgave me. We've been married 22 years. My children, my son is a Marine. He's getting ready to deploy to Italy. He'll be out there for 9 months, so prayers for him. My children who swore would never speak to me again tell me they love me every day. My daughter is following in my footsteps in her second year in nursing school. I've always told my children, you're born leaders. With your mother's intelligence and my ability to exploit people with intelligence, you will lead America into a new age. I was certain I'd never work in medicine again. I'm working as a paramedic again. And taking my prereqs for nursing bridge course. I never thought alcohol and drugs would never not be a part of my life, but has been absent from my life for 592 days, 12 hours, 13 minutes, and 48 seconds. This is us at Dollywood in November. The bottom line is, CR 12-step program, much like recovery, was taken one step at a time. I've learned I'm entitled to nothing but death and burning for eternity. But here I am. I'm breathing, I'm talking, and I'm saved. I hope you can see this miracle that stands before you. The night of August 7th, 2023, I died. I said goodbye to the old Cameron that was a slave to sin. I'm now a servant to the Lord. If you're saying to yourself, I could never be free from my vices, hurts, habits, or hang-ups, you are more wrong than you know. This is what God can do. He is boundless. He saved me just like He can save each and every one of you. If you believe in signs, there's a reason you're here, and it's because you're worth it to Him. Thank you.